Okay, hello. Welcome to this DVW Analytics webinar around using your SAP data within your Power BI solutions, connecting to it directly using the DVW Analytics Power BI Connector for SAP. My name's Ian James. I work for DVW Analytics, and my colleague Darren Walton is also on the line, keen to answer any of your questions should you have any. As part of the console, you can add questions, and he will try to respond to you as quickly as possible. So let's start. So DVW have been connecting users of analytics systems to their data in SAP for around about 6 or 7 years, and indeed, we now have well over 300 companies, organizations around the globe of different verticals, different sizes. Some of the very biggest companies in the world to maybe some of the smaller users of SAP are all using our connectors to bring their data out of SAP and into their analytics platforms, and indeed into their wider processes, and also to write back from our systems, from our connectors into SAP. So today we're talking about connecting SAP into Power BI, and I thought just a few slides just to give you an idea of the context of our connectors and how they can be used within your Power BI solution. You can see on the screen here a partial list of the types of systems that you could use within Power BI to extract data. So for instance, we can extract data. If you look at the top right, left here, sorry, that we can extract data from all manner of ERP systems. So certainly the ECC systems, but also older R3 and even S4HANA, the newer S4HANA systems. Equally in the BW space, we can extract data from older BW systems, but also the latest BW on HANA, BW for HANA solutions. Other ABAP stack solutions, we can extract data from our the business suite, largely legacy nowadays, or going that way, but I know there are a lot of these systems around, so we can connect into maybe CRM, SCM, SRM solutions, and also the industry solutions. So those are the specific for each industry. In fact, anywhere on the ABAP stack within SAP, we can connect in and extract data in various ways. Also, however, we can connect into the cloud side, so the obviously newer systems for SAP, relatively so, but systems like C4C, the Marketing Cloud. Also, you can see the acquisition acquired a little while ago, SuccessFactors. We can connect it there, and the planning solutions too. So business planning consolidation and the more recent integrated business planning. All of these systems we can connect to and extract data directly into your Power BI solution. This is a partial list. I'll hasten to add. So if there are any systems, please come onto our website. That's dvwanalytics.com. Have a look. There's a list on there of different systems that are available. If it's not there, then just contact us, and I'll give you those details later, and we can confirm whether or not that's possible. 98% of the time, 99% of the time, that's certainly going to be the case. Okay, let's talk about how we connect into Power BI then, because we've got all those systems we can connect to, but the way we connect is quite varied as well. There's a depth of connection and possibilities depending on your use case. If we look on the left-hand side here, you can see the type of data within SAP that we can connect to. So from the very granular, so we can, if we start at the top here, we can connect directly into SAP tables. So that's tables obviously within the SAP system. We can connect into SAP T codes or reports, transaction codes that you would run in SAP GUI. You can also run from Power BI. SAP Spool. So this is where you maybe run a job or a transaction code in the background that will write to what was the old print queue. Not so much printing nowadays, but there's still the spool there and we can read data that's been written to that spool, to that queue. We mentioned the cloud side, so there are all manner of OData connectors. That's the standard on that side of things. So we can connect into SAP OData services. More technically, perhaps, and for use quite a lot on more substantial integrations, maybe, are SAP BAPIs or function modules that have been RFC enabled. We can connect into ODP. So if you've got a Delta mechanism, for instance, that's been supported by your ODP solution from SAP, we can connect into that and pull out data on a Delta basis using that technology there. We've got wide-ranging coverage on the BW side, as you can see, so we can connect into BW queries and query views, into info providers, so all sorts of cubes, multi-providers, DSOs, even info objects we can connect and bring data out of. And finally, in BW, we can look at BW hierarchies as well, so we can bring out flattened versions of the hierarchies for use in your analytics, maybe for consolidation, etc. Finally, on this view, our HANA views, so we can connect to any flavor of HANA views, CDS, calculation views, etc., etc. So if you're on a HANA system, an SAP HANA system, we can pull data from those views as well. Now, how does it work? Well, basically, what we offer is an integration platform, a console which will enable you to build connectivity into the various different types of SAP data that support obviously your use case downstream in Power BI. As you'll see, hopefully during the next minutes, next hour, certainly, this connectivity is really easy to set up, and we have users with little or no experience of SAP. Maybe they just run a few transaction codes here and there, to much more technical basis type users building heavy duty integrations using our platform. And so you'll see how easy it is to connect via our platform, create those connections, and then consume them within Power BI. And indeed, even more so, control them so that you can pull the data that you want and call the data back from SAP in a very seamless way. And that's true for both desktop and server versions of Power BI. So some important features of our connectors. You can read on the screen here. It is easy to install. There's very little footprint either on the desktop server or indeed on your SAP system. One point that's worth noting is that as a paradigm, our connectors never connect directly into the SAP database. We would never hit the database directly. We always go via what's called the application layer. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, one of those is you can see here. Because when the connection is made by a user, by an SAP user, and by connecting into the application server, SAP will check the bona fide of that user, confirm that they're the correct user, and then apply their authorizations. So users can only see data that they're authorized to see by that SAP system. Secondly, is a more technical side, and that's in order to respect the safety belts, the safety mechanisms that are built into the SAP system via the application layer, whereby your SAP basis team will restrict the amount of data and the time you tie up a process into SAP so as to protect the system itself. Obviously, that's a precious system, a precious resource, so it's really important to them and to us that happens, and using this mechanism, going via the application layer, both respects authorizations and these safety belts, so it keeps the SAP system protected. Okay, let's drill down a little bit and look at what we're going to look at today. Technically, the way that we connect in, there are two options, and as you can see, we have our SAP sources. This is where we've just been on a couple of slides ago. The integration platform, where we build our connectivity, and then it's the connectivity into Power BI that is interesting. Firstly, there is a direct connector that is available using an OData web services. So we can pull data, or call, if you like, our connections from Power BI using OData Web Services. And the second option, and we'll show you both of these today, is to give more flexibility, more technical possibility by embedding code, Python code that is, and use Python scripting to make those calls. We'll show you both options. Obviously, it depends on your use case, which way to go. But hopefully today I can give you some ideas and see the power of the possible. Let's start with the OData then. So in terms of OData, very simple. We can connect our different systems. This obviously isn't the whole list, but they're the major components in SAP. We can connect and create these connections within our console. We then use OData services to connect and pull that data into Power BI. Simple as that. Okay, so let's start building, shall we? If we jump off now, here we are in the. I'll just tidy this up a little bit. This is the XCS or the PCS console. Okay, so this is where we build our connections, and you can see I've already built some here for T codes and BW query here, a few tables, etc. But let's start from the beginning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a connection that will bring data back from a transaction code. So all I need to do is hit create. And when I hit create, I get a nice user-friendly console in order to build my connection. If we look at the green bars here, then we see firstly that we can choose the type of data that we're going to be looking at. Okay, and this reflects the list that I've just shown you on the presentation there. So from BW hierarchies, tables, spools, success factors, as you can see, across the board, different types of data that we can connect to within SAP. And again, this is going to be driven depending upon your use case. Equally, we can connect to as many SAP systems as we have. There is no restriction, by the way, on the license. You can connect to as many systems as you wish. That's not a problem. Licensing is based on the desktop or on the server, the number of desktops or the number of servers. Simple as that. So in here you can see that I have multiple, obviously I've got lots of demo systems, but you get a flavor of the type of systems you can connect to. BW, CRM, S4HANA, even success factors in there somewhere, okay? But I'm going to just stick with my plain old ECC system. And when I select my ECC system, you can see that it's retained within the console, double encrypted, of course, my username and password, okay? That's the username and password I use to log on to this SAP system. So this is where my authorizations come in. Of course, if you have SSO, that's not a problem as well. So single sign-on, we can support that. And equally, you would log on with your single sign-on credentials. At this point, I can ping the system and I can check that the username and the configuration for that system are good. You can see that it is, all is great. So I can say, okay. And I can give my new connection a name, okay? So let's call it test T code 123, okay? I'm going to save that there just so I don't forget. And I'll now go on to the next tab, which is the parameter tab. And this is where the interesting stuff happens. So as you can see, because I've selected to connect to a T code, I get a screen related to that. And I can connect to a T code, or indeed, if I've got a report or I know the report, then I can add that in. That's the program name. But let's stick to T code. I'm going to add in a T code here, so FBL3N. This is a financial accounting document line item report. Some of you may know it, of course, yeah. When I hit search, it's talked to my ECC system and it's checked that that T code exists and brought back also the program name that sits behind the report that sits behind that T code. And then it goes back when I select that. And the first thing it gives me are the variants that are saved for that transaction code. So these are the variants of saved parameters that are saved within the SAP system itself. I'm going to select one of those and I can run this T code now with that variant. Equally, if I didn't want to work that way, I could also add some values in here. So this is a manual selection screen. This is equal to effectively what you would see when you run the transaction code within the SAP GUI. So I can pick company code or GL or dates, and indeed I can transfer the values from my variant just by copying into here. And this now becomes, if I just sort this now becomes a starting point. So you can see I've got company code 3000, some posting dates, some GLs. I can pick even a layout, etc., exactly as you would on the GUI. And I can change this if I want. I won't do for now. I'm just going to run it as it is. So let's go into data preview, hit raw preview, and that's going to run that transaction code with those parameters, with that variant effectively. And here it is. This is exactly the output you would see in the GUI. So some of you may know FBL3N or related T codes, and it's very similar. So you get a GL and company code. So here's a combination, and you get the postings that have been made on that account during that time frame. You get a sort of little mini table with some totals, and then if I just scroll down a little bit, you can see then I get a second table for another combination and another combination, etc., etc. Now, this is sort of a, let's say, a nice output for within the SAP GUI. Certainly a nice output if this is the end point for your transactions today. But of course, we're not here about endpoints. We want to be able to use this data downstream in analytics in Power BI. So within the tool, we have functions that can tidy this up. As you can see, it's not great for that. We'd like a flatter table. We'd like data that's more usable certainly in a usable form. So let's use those tools. So the functions that we can use. So for instance, here's a header line. So if I right click on this line, I can say, look, add a header row. Okay, so that's added this and it's recognized this and will recognize this as a header row for this table. Above here, we've got this GL and company code. Well, of course, it would be really good to have that data as part of the table rather than sitting outside. So, but if I right click, I can pass as a header field, and you can see it start to collate my configurations. Here's another one, so pass header field again. And finally, I'm going to exclude this. I don't really. What you can see it's already excluded because they're grayed out, the blank lines and the dashed lines. But these totals don't help me really in analytics because I can total later on. So if I right click and ignore this row, then it's going to ignore these, but it's not quite got it right because what it's done is it said, look, it's seen that there's a pipe at the start. So there's a pipe at the start of this row, but there's also a pipe at the start of other rows. So it's going to ignore far too much, but that's not a problem because we can very easily and manually configure this to get exactly what we want. So if I see an asterisk, actually, you can see the asterisk here. It's actually in the fourth place, the fourth column, if you like. Now I'm going to exclude it. What's really cool now is that if I press raw preview again, it color codes everything that I've done. So here's my header row in green. Here are my header fields that I'm going to bring into the table, which is in white, and anything in gray is going to be ignored. So you can see my first table is perfect here, but also it's recognized that anything in that format will be treated the same way. So here's the second table, the third table, etc., etc. That's superb now because when I confirm layout, you'll see that the output, the sample output, is exactly as I'd want, much better than the output from the T code, of course. We've got our GL and company code within the table. We've passed those columns into usable fields within a flat table, and we've got rid of all the extras, all the totals lines, etc., etc. At this stage, we can even start to play with the fields themselves. So maybe some of these fields we don't want, so we can deselect them and say, look, don't bring them through. We can change lengths. Maybe it's picked up, I don't know, a GL account number of length 6, and it should be length 8. Or the type, the data type could be changed at this point. But for now, let's just save it as it is, and let's use that downstream in Power BI. So that's that done. Obviously, I've talked quite a lot around that, but that can be done literally in a couple of minutes. So we created our connection. We've created a particular connection into SAP to run that T code with that variant or with those parameters. Now then, if I go back to the console, you can see here is my connection. That file has been saved there. And indeed, I can now go into Power BI and connect to this connection into SAP and bring data from it. All I need to do is know the OData URL. And to do that, I just right click and say, copy the OData URL. And now we're going to use it across in Power BI. So here's a nice starting point for Power BI. Let's go get the data. And when we get data, of course, if it wakes up, we're going to look for an OData source. There we are, an OData feed, and we connect. And it's going to want a URL. Of course, that's the URL I've just copied. So I'll paste it into here, and I'll just say OK. So that'll go talk to the console and bring back all the valid connections it can find. And these are the connections that you just saw in the console. There's the BW one, the tables, etc. Here's the one I've just created. So let's just tick on this and we get a nice preview of the T-code data, as you can see, coming into Power BI. And if we load that data, then Power BI is now calling back into SAP, well, actually to the console, and the console is calling back into SAP to bring that data for us. That's done. And you can see now that we have a table within Power BI that we can use. You'll notice that a mounting currency here is a string. You can see it's not a measure. So that's no problems because we can just go and adjust that. We can see in here, here's the data, of course. Let's go adjust this and make it into a decimal. Of course, that didn't work very well. So let's try again. Never works when you want to do a demo, does it? Let's see what it is. I tell you what it is. It's my, of course, it's my my settings. I've been changed somehow, but you can see I've got settings that don't comply to my local settings. My SAP ones don't, but that's not a problem. Look, we can transform the data. We're in Power BI. So let's change. We're going to change. Get rid of the dots first because we've got dots where they shouldn't be in the thousands place. I like commas and dots, and I'm going to change my commas to dots. So we're just in Power BI now. So it's Power BI data, and now finally I think I should be able to, cross your fingers for me, change this to true values. There we are. Okay, so that's great. You can see we can do anything we would normally do with data once it's in Power BI. Okay, doesn't matter that it came from SAP, but now if we close and apply that change, we can use the data within Power BI. You can see it's refreshing again. And of course, we can pull the data across. Let's see if we can get it to work. It may be grumpy, of course, as you saw the error there for some reason. There we go, it's not too bad. So maybe, I don't know, you can pull, company code, GL, and let's hope we can bring some values in. There we go. So here's our values. And what's great is, of course, assuming you don't make some error that I've made there, or it's grumpy for some reason, that we can just come in here and refresh the data, of course, yeah. So no problem at all. We can run this today, and obviously build our report, and tomorrow we refresh it and get the new data available. So let's make this into a count, and you can see that, so our nice dashboard now can be refreshed tomorrow with new data that's going to be up to date and refreshed for us. Okay, so that's how we connect into SAP using a T code. Let me show you a dashboard that I've created already that's a little bit more involved using the same process of an OData call. Okay, this time I'm using some table data, and you can see that I've got again it's finance data, so line item data, and I'm going to jump back into the editor here just so we can see how this works. So what we've got here is basically a call that comes from a source, and again here's my OData call. You can see it's picking up my table, but this time I've added some parameters. Okay, so you can see parameters here. These are company code, fiscal year, and document type. Okay, you can see them labeled here, and you see they have some values too. And as we step through this particular piece, what we're doing is we're going to pull some data, and that's going to pull data from the BKPF table. You can see that from the name of the OData source here. So I've set up a configuration for BKPF. It's going to pull that header data from the SAP system for me. And as you can see, when we do that, sorry, one more, we get our header data, company code, accounting document, fiscal year, and all our header data coming from there. However, that's not the end of the picture, because as you can see, the next step invokes a custom function. Okay, and that custom function actually is another call to a table. It's this time to the BSEG table, to the line item table. So what's great in here is that using these OData calls, we can connect them. So we can use the first call to get the header data, but then from the data that is returned, pick up exactly the line item data that we're interested in. So it's a really efficient way of bringing data back. And if I invoke that call, then you can see that the data comes back, and not only do we have header data, but to the right here, we have line item data. Okay, so if I just flick back into here, you can see that we've got a combination now of header and line item fields that we can bring into our analysis. And of course, once we're in here, this is just normal type of analysis that you would expect to see in Power BI. Okay, but what's great is because of those parameters, we can edit the parameters live. So for instance, we can change these values. Maybe instead of company code 1000, we'll have company code 3000. We can change the year and maybe the document type. And now we'll make another call back into the SAP system, but with different parameters. So we can parameterize the call from the front end here. So whilst we have our connection created on the console to call to those two tables, BKPF and BSEG, we can make structured and parameterized calls back into those connections to bring exactly the data we want. And as you can see, we now get company code 3000 with different data refreshed as we see here. Okay. So let's skip back then. So that's how we will connect to data using OData, using our console. And the second method, slightly more technically involved, but not really so much more difficult, as hopefully you'll see, is to use Python scripting. The value of using Python scripting is it gives us even more flexibility when it comes to embedding those SAP data calls within our Power BI models. Okay, in this case, you do exactly the same. You create your connection back into your SAP system. The console itself will generate for you the Python scripts that you need in order to create a call back from Power BI using your local Python engine to call the data into Power BI and make that connection. So hopefully again I can show you that and show you how easy that is to use. I'm going to go back into the console then and create another connection. Here we are. This time I'm going to use a table data read tool because I'm going to read from the table, and I'm going to use that BKPF table because we've already talked about it. So that's the header table, yeah. So we need to give it a name. Sorry, test table whatever 1 2 3. There we are. I'm just going to save that and then parameterize it. So BKPF. Here we are. And if we search, you can see that immediately we're talking back into the ECC system, and anywhere where BKPF is found, either in the technical name or the description of the table, we get to see that table represented here. Now, obviously, this is the one we want, so that we say OK. And that again calls back into SAP. And as you can see, it quickly brings back the metadata, the structure of that table, which you can see here. The key fields and the data fields underneath. Okay, these are all the fields within that table. As you can see, there are a lot of them. And the next step is then to choose which of these you want in your output. Notice, by the way, if you have more of a technical bent, you can turn on the keys, so you have the technical names as well for these fields. Can be very useful. So let's pick a few of these to run. Okay, so it doesn't matter which ones really. Let's go with those. Okay, so these are the fields that are going to be in my output. The next thing to do is to say, well, I want to pick specific data, of course. So I'm going to want to maybe pick a company code. So I'm going to add a filter for this, and the company code I'm going to use is 3000. Equally, I may want to pick a year. So let's pick 2019. That's good. And then finally, I'm going to pick some document types. Okay. This time, instead of typing them, I'm not sure which ones they are. So I'm going to right click on here and edit the filter item. What's nice is I know they start with a K. So if I search for them, I get a list back from SAP with all those document types that are relevant. And I see that these are exactly the ones I want. So I can pick one of these and use it in the low key. I can do a range, all the usual operators, so greater than, less than. I can even use a list or a pattern. So if I use a list, I can just say, hey, pick all of these guys. One other functionality that's worth pointing out here, and this is again across our tools and our different connectors, is this possibility to split. Okay, and if I say okay, I'll explain what that means. So to split a call means exactly that. You can imagine, if you know BKPF and BSEG, they're some of the biggest tables on an SAP system. For some companies and some organizations, you're going to find that these are tens of millions of rows, if not hundreds of millions. These are huge tables. Okay, so to extract for a whole company code in a fiscal year is probably not going to be possible, because you're going to bump across against those safety belts I mentioned previously. And obviously we don't want to break the SAP system. That's not the way forward. So the way to do this is to break down those calls, and this splitting mechanism allows that. So what will happen here is it will break down the call and make a separate call for each different document type, and we can do that on any field we wish and any combination of fields. So we can chunk up, if you like, the calls and keep ourselves below the limit, and keep obviously our basis team happy that we're not doing causing any problems. If we go to data preview and execute this, then we get a view of exactly the data and how it's going to look when it is used downstream in Power BI. So it's worked through those 6. You can see that it's the correct company code and fiscal year, and indeed here are the Ks in the document type. There will be some other ones here, KG, as you can see, and there they are. So all is good here. We're happy with this data, so we're going to save that connection. Now, this is exactly the same as we did with the transaction code. Okay, so this connection could be used as an OData connection, no problem. That will now appear on our list that we saw earlier. But instead this time, as you can see, I've jumped across to the scripts tab, and we're going to use our connection to create a Python script which we're going to use in Power BI. So you can see the script is automatically generated. You can see in here. What's great, of course, also is that we can add filters into the script itself. So we can do it via a table, or we can add specific fields that we want to filter on in this list here. So let's add company code here, and you can see that we can give it a name. So this will be the input name we use from Power BI. We can also add some coding. In this case, I'm going to add an extra fill, because quite often the company code gets truncated, should I say. So we need to maybe add preceding zeros. That's what that little bit of code will do there. But lots of other things we can do here too. But also, if I just whiz down here, let's put in fiscal year. We'll name it fisc year. And if I now refresh this thing here, you can see the coding's there already. But if I refresh it, you can see it's added those filters for me. There they are. One for company code, one for fiscal year, and there's the extra little bit of code that we can add in. And we can actually, if you know your Python, you can change it here too. So I'm going to actually use this code now. So I'm just going to save it locally, so I've got a copy of it. But then hit copy, and that puts it to the clipboard, and that's it. So we've got that saved and ready to use. So let's whiz across to Power BI now. I'm going to start a new canvas here. So the first thing to do is create my inputs, and what I'm going to do is add a couple of, well, as you can see, a table with a couple of values in. One is for company code, and I'm going to add the value of 1000 here, and then the second one is for fiscal year, and those are the two variables that I added in, as you'll remember just now, in my code. So fiscal year, and I'll make that 2021. Okay, so now I've got that. You can see my initial sources here. Power BI is trying to be helpful here, so it's changed the type. I don't want them to be numeric, so I want them to stay as strings. And you can see there's the two values I'm going to use as my inputs, and they're going to filter my extraction from SAP. So the next thing to do is now run a Python script. Obviously the Python script that I have copied, and I'm going to paste it into here. You can see here it is, and there's my filters. Just checking that they're the same values as you see in the table here. I'm going to use that script, and it's that script that will call the data from SAP as soon as I say OK. So it's running the script now. It's going to use those variables, so for that particular company code and fiscal year, and you can see that's brought back data that I'm interested in. If I now expand that table, it just takes a couple of seconds just to do that. So then we'll be able to see the data brought back from BKPF with those filters. Hopefully Power BI can work that out. Here it is. So there's the data. You can see it's 2021. It's company code 1000. And here's the BKPF data straight from SAP. Now obviously that means we can be very flexible from the front end and request just the data that we want from Power BI directly. So let's just skip back to the presentation now. We've just done that demo. Let's just talk now about server and the two options. Both work equally well, so we can use our OData services as we saw on desktop. We can build it from the desktop as you see down here, but we then publish that into the server version of the PCS console. Let me just show you that. So if we go back to the console, we can go to the file management here, and you can see here in my files obviously, but if I right click on one of those files, I can now push that across into the server. So I click on the button here, And then once that's just pushed across, we can then change from the local version across into the server version. You can see that file has now landed there. So we can control both our local version and what's in the server and available there from within the console. Once it's within the console, then obviously it can be used directly via maybe a Power BI admin to create analytic models, or it can be used in the server and then consumed downstream in other Power BI dashboards or by local users from the server as usual. In terms of Python, it works pretty much the same way. We can publish those connections across, and then we use our Python script either directly from a Power BI admin, or we can build models within the Power BI server, which again can be consumed downstream. So let's show you one last example of how powerful the connectors can be. Here's a dashboard I've built already, so let's just see exactly how that works. You can see it's built on BKPF data, but also BSEG data. So we've combined data here. So it's exactly what we started off doing just now, BKPF data, but we're also calling line item data, segment data behind that. So let's just see how that works. We're going to just click into the Power BI editor, and you can see that actually what we have is two calls, one to BKPF, which is exactly as we've just built, exactly the same with the source from the table there. So we can control that in the same way as we've done before. So here is it, company code and fiscal year. And you can see what's retrieved is for company code 3000 and 2021. But also we've got BSEG here. So here's the line item table. And what's clever here is we use the source of BKPF, as you can see here, as the starting point for our BSEG. So we only get exactly the line items that we're interested in. So we pick the headers from BKPF and feed them as the source for BSEG. So we're being very specific, very efficient in the data that we pick. And you can see here that once we go into the script, what we're using is the BKPF headers as the filters for BSEG. And so exactly the same as before, we get our data out. This is now the line item data that relates to our headers. And of course, the last step is just to join those two together using just a simple join within Power BI. So here is that join. As we said, pretty simple. It's just on the key fields of the two tables, the header and the segment table. And obviously, once we do that, we can use that within our dashboard as we saw from the top. We can see that if I just flick back now, and you can see the data comes across, and we have all the detail from header and line item combined. What's nice, of course, is that we can go back to the start, look at the source, and we can change the initial filter, the initial condition, if you like, to what we wish. So we can change maybe to a new year, let's call it 2019, and even add multiple company codes. So we'll add 3000 and let's use the same year, 2019, say OK. If we now close and apply that new setup, and it automatically applies that to our dashboard, after a few seconds you'll see is that the data will be pulled back, and we actually pull back in two separate calls, one for 1000, the company code 1000, and a second for 3000. So this chunks up those calls. Again, there's inbuilt efficiency in here. But what's happening is that SAP has been called, we'll pull back that data, and hopefully we'll refresh. This is a demo, so you'll have to bear with my demo system. But there it is with data for 1000 and company code 3000 combined, and obviously that's built in to your dashboard, and you can use all the power of Power BI from there on. So hopefully you can see just how powerful and flexible the DVW Analytics connectors for Power BI are, and this webinar has given you some food for thought on how you can streamline your processes, making them far more dynamic and automatic in the back end, but also much more flexible for your users on the front end.
Thank you for your attention. If you'd like to see more, then please contact us or visit our website at dvwanalytics.com. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.